Wake Up to Money.
Welcome to the Wake Up to Money podcast. You're listening to Sean Farrington and Louise Cooper on BBC 5 Live. Coming up today, 60p a minute helplines, a lost luggage crisis, thousands of delayed journeys, but the boss has finally spoken on the big trouble at BA.
We will find out exactly why the backup systems did not trigger at the right time, and we will make sure that it doesn't happen again.
And after a prime-time spot last night for the Labour and Tory leaders, an SNP manifesto launched today. We'll also be hearing from our latest election panel on the deficit, welfare and business taxes. And the papers, Louise, what have they got today?
Lots on British Airways, as you'd expect. Little bit on RBS with the potential settlement. But the Financial Times headline is all about the US car loan market and fears that consumers have taken on more debt than they can handle. The FTSE opens at an all-time high at 7547.
This is BBC 5 Live.
So British Airways says it will resume all scheduled flights today, but there are still people waiting to be reunited with their bags after the weekend's chaos. Around 75,000 people had their journeys affected because of that IT systems failure on Saturday. But we finally heard from the British Airways Chief Executive, Alex Cruz, who apologised and said they would get to the bottom of what went wrong.
The actual problem only lasted a few minutes. So there was a power surge and there was a backup system which did not work at that particular point in time. It was restored after a few hours in terms of some hardware changes, but eventually it took a long time for messaging and for systems to come up again as the operation was picking up again. We are and we will conduct this investigation, exhaustive till the very end. We will find out exactly why the backup systems did not trigger at the right time, and we will make sure that it doesn't happen again.
That was Chief Executive Alex Cruz, although bear in mind we have yet to hear from Willie Walsh, who is the overall head of IAG. Shares, though, in IAG fell by nearly 3% on the Madrid Stock Exchange yesterday. Be interesting to see what happens when they open today in London after the bank holiday. It's expected to cost tens of millions of pounds in compensation for passengers, many of whom had to spend at least a night in a hotel, or for some, sleeping on the departure floor.
Oh, the pictures. I mean, we've all sort of been there at some point, but when it's a bank holiday weekend and you're expecting
to go away,
a long trip away, there's not, not a lot more worse for your holiday plans, are there? Louise, when you hear from Alex Cruz there, he's the British Airways boss. IAG own British Airways, and that's Willie Walsh. I mean, it's taken a bit of time to hear from one of the top brass, isn't it, for what is a huge failure in their IT system. And
I quite like the way that Willie Walsh clearly ducked the issue, because whenever IAG do numbers, you don't hear from Alex Cruz,
no.
You always hear from Willie Walsh. It's interesting because quite a lot of the papers are going with BA chief refuses to resign after catastrophic IT failure. That's on the front page of The Guardian. That's pretty much mimicked in other front pages as well. The Telegraph, BA chief refuses to quit or blame cost-cutting for flights fiasco. On the inside pages of The Sun, you've got fury at BA Con helpline pointing out that British Airways faced new fury, telling customers to ring a premium rate phone number at 62p a minute. The Beleaguered Airlines official Twitter account advised passengers to call the helpline at 0844 493 0797, which costs up to 55p a minute imposed by the phone company and another 7p a minute straight to BA. So criticise that. And then on the front inside page of the Daily Mail, an astonishing photo of a sea of bags. A sea of bags. Hundreds of bags were left behind a cordon at Heathrow's Terminal 5 after all BA flights were cancelled.
And a lot of them look very similar to each other, don't they? You wouldn't want to be standing on a huge long conveyor belt waiting for yours to come through on one of those.
It's quite a flowery one. That's probably a good idea. Have a flowery bag so at least you know where it is.
Well, I've started putting a little coloured ribbon on mine.
Oh.
Yeah, that helps a bit. But this, when you look at the cost of this helpline that BA are charging, it's one of those things again, Louise, isn't it, that doesn't really come to light until lots of people need it at the same time, and then all of a sudden, do they really need to be charging 60-odd pence a minute to help people in what is just about the worst situation BA could have put them in? Yeah,
and the Times actually puts it on the front page. BA accused of profiting from trapped passengers. Not a great headline for the front page of the Times for BA.
And the Times also adding that Alex Cruz there, the chief exec, He's paid £830,000 a year.
So he can afford the 62p a phone line.
I'm sure he could. He might need to call it because they haven't a clue what seems to have actually gone on with that power surge. We're going to be talking a bit later to an IT expert about what went wrong at BA. If you're still going through any problems, of course, you can get in touch with us. If you're still at the airport, are you waiting for your luggage? Have you got there? But has it all gone smoothly? Maybe you're one of those. BA managed to help. You can text us on 85058 or on social media at BBC 5 Live. We're also going to be talking a lot about the election, Louise. We had the prime time. Well, it wasn't quite a debate, was it? It was audience questioning and then a bit of a grilling Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn got last night. But we've also got SNP manifesto being launched today. Lots more to talk about. We've heard little bits of additional, defending policies almost, isn't it been, Louise, in the last few days, whether it's social care for the Conservatives or how Labour are going to nationalise all the companies they're going to do. There's actually been quite a few policies to get your teeth into, hasn't there?
Sean, I've been sitting in a campsite in a field in Sussex with no mobile phone coverage.
Don't tell me it hasn't been crossing your mind, though.
I've dipped out of the world agenda for the last 3 days. Now I'm back into it.
Well, yeah, we are back into it this morning. So what we'd like to hear from people, when we've got our panel on, we'll put these ideas to them as well. What's been the biggest winner or loser amongst all the policies you've heard so far? Either side, is there one that jumps out as you think, do you know what, I could go with that, or I can't believe they've suggested it, I would never vote for that? Let us know. You can text us on 85058, or you can get in touch. If you want to get in touch on social media, if you want to tweet, use the hashtag WakeUpToMoney, and we will pick that up. And the advantage of that as well is, Louise, we can catch it if you're listening on the podcast, tweet during the day.
Is that hashtag WUTM?
No, it's not.
Or
no.
the full,
it's
we have to write it out?
WakeUpToMoney.
Right, you have to write
yes.
it out, okay.
Yes, so you can say hashtag WakeUpToMoney. If you're getting in touch on Twitter as well, use that any time of day. Text us 85058 as well. Now, if you want to let us know what your biggest winner or loser amongst the policies we've heard so far in the general election campaign.
Wake up to money around the world
On 5 Live. 5 Live.
Now, we're not going to whip off to Wall Street this time, Louise, because they were actually closed for Memorial Day, public holiday. We were closed here in the UK as well on the stock markets, but Europe was open, fortunately. Gives us something to talk about. What happened there?
Well, it's political risk back in focus in Italy. The Italian FTSE MIB index closed down 2% yesterday. It's all on the back of fears of an early election in autumn. Shares in Italian banks fell over 3%. That's the worst day in almost 4 months for Italian banks. And it's about either the possibility of a hung parliament or strength by the Eurosceptic five-star movement, who are polling very well at the moment. And of course, Italy, one of the biggest indebted countries in the world, and we've got a political party that doesn't really like being in the euro.
Laura Lambie's with us this morning, Senior Investment Director at Investec Wealth and Investment. Laura, morning.
Good morning.
When you look at the European stock markets yesterday, you see Italian exchange there, the stock exchange falling by 2%, the main index there. Are there concerns amongst investors again about that European periphery like we've had before?
I think so, yes, and we've also had some news bubbling up about Greece also having to renegotiate debt in a month's time. And we've got Germany and the IMF disagreeing about how that's going to happen, how these austerity measures are going to be met. So it's not just Italy that I think is struggling a bit, but really the focus on Italian markets, because there was very little else to look at, as you say, with the US being shut, the UK being shut, China shut too, and China shut today, as was Hong Kong. So not much news out there, so I suppose that's what we were focusing on.
Laura, stay with us. We've got lots more to talk about very shortly, but let's cross over to Singapore now. Speak to Sharanjit Lal. Sharanjit, good morning.
Hello there.
What have the markets in Asia been doing this morning?
Well, you know what? They were incredibly quiet because, as you mentioned, Wall Street was closed for Memorial Day. There's a number of markets here in the region that are shut. China, Hong Kong, Taiwan markets, they're all closed for the Dragon Boat Festival. So actually, a lot of the leads that investors were paying attention to all came from Europe. So basically what you just talked about, those concerns of a Greek bailout, early Italian elections, comments by the European Central Bank chief about the need for more continued stimulus, that's keeping a lot of traders sidelined today. And all of these geopolitical fears sapping risk appetite. They've been weighing on Asian stocks, and they've actually helped lift a lot of the safe havens, including the likes of the Japanese yen and gold. And because of the stronger yen, we are seeing a lot of the export-reliant stocks being sold off in Japan. So Japan's Nikkei is lower. Australian markets are lower too. But what was interesting today was that we heard from Singapore, which has fined 2 banks over the 1MDB scandal. Now, this is the scandal that was at the centre of money laundering investigations in at least 6 countries. 1MDB being set up by Malaysia's Prime Minister Najib Razak in 2009. It was really meant to turn Kuala Lumpur into a financial hub, boost the economy through strategic investments, but actually it came under lots of scrutiny 2 years ago after it missed payments for some $11 billion, and there were lots of reports suggesting that there was a paper trail allegedly tracing quite a lot of money to Malaysia's Prime Minister. At any rate, Singapore and many other countries are looking and have been investigating. They spent the last 2 years investigating some of the financial institutions that were tied to this whole scandal, and today they found they've actually fined a Singaporean bank, UOB, Credit Suisse, facing penalties of over $1 million, and this was following a 2-year review by financial regulators here.
So it's still a bit of a way off getting a resolution there. Sharonjit.
Very much so.
Thank you very much for that. Sharonjit Lale, our correspondent in Singapore. Louise, first text in. The biggest loser, Labour's financial transaction tax. Somebody's let us know if you've got your biggest winner or loser from any of the general election policies so far. You pop us a text, 85058.
With us to look at the markets is Laura Lambie from Investec Wealth and Investment. British Airways shares open in London today. They're open in IAG shares open in Madrid yesterday. How much are they likely to be down, do you think?
Well, going by the Madrid Stock Exchange, about 3%. It's quite difficult, really, though, at the moment to gauge what the long-term implications for the share price are, because we don't know the underlying causes of the problems being faced by BA. Is it to do with weak management, for instance? What sort of impact is it going to have on the brand? So I suppose short term we're going to see a dip, but the ramifications of this have still to be seen, and that will have more of an impact long term.
Interesting that one of the reasons British Airways has been slashing costs is to try to make it more competitive with low-cost airlines like Ryanair. Well, Ryanair, we get numbers this morning, don't we?
Yes, they had very good April numbers for traffic, and that one of the reasons for that was because Easter was in April rather than March. But there's no doubt that the domestic airlines are facing a lot of challenges. Obviously, terrorist plots in Europe haven't helped matters, increasing security costs, and obviously the weakness in sterling. So it's a challenging time for them. But we are expecting reasonably good results from Ryanair.
Yeah, apparently it's quite a good idea to be nice to customers. That boosts your revenue and your profits, according to Michael Leary.
Well, they did well for a time, maybe not playing on that, didn't they?
RBS, looks like there's an agreement reached with shareholders. Where exactly are we now?
It looks as if about 9,000 shareholders who are being represented are about to agree with the bank so that the lawsuit will not go to court. And I suspect if that happens, the remaining shareholders will have insufficient funds to really fight the court case. So it looks as if shareholders might be getting about 82 pence compensation, those that took up the rights issue back in 2008.
And that does mean we may not see Fred Goodwin, the former CEO of RBS, in court.
I think so. I think many shareholders and a lot of RBS employees would like to see that, because he really has not been held to account or given any real public explanation of what happened after the takeover of ABN AMRO.
Wouldn't the big shareholders like to see that, Laura?
I suspect so, but the cost of a court case is just massive, and settling out of court, certainly from a cost angle, I think is what the big institutions are looking for here. But you're right, morally, I think a lot of people want to see the former chief executive held to account here.
And that may not happen. Quite a lot in the papers post the Trump G7 NATO visit, also on what Angela Merkel said on Sunday, warning the times in which we can fully count on others are somewhat over, as I've experienced in the past few days. And we Europeans must really take our destiny in our own hands. What do you make of Trump's visit, the impact on markets, geopolitical risk? What are your thoughts currently?
I think the big thing that I think came out of it was his failure to endorse NATO's Article 5, which I think was Merkel's response to that. And I think more than anything, that probably reflects a deep division in Trump's national security team, which is not good news. At the moment, markets seem to be ignoring a lot of very negative sentiments towards Trump and some of the things he's been saying. But that could well change, and so there's certainly room for markets to take fright over these sorts of disagreements within the Trump administration.
Laura Lambie from Investec Wealth and Management, thank you very much. Wealth and Investment, thank you very much. In terms of news scheduled for today, not a huge amount. We got late tonight, we get GfK consumer confidence figures. That's going to be pretty closely watched because, of course, the theme for 2017 is inflation rising faster than wages again and the impact that has on retail spending. So that GfK consumer confidence number out at something like midnight tonight. On the currency market, sterling rallied a bit yesterday after an appalling week last week. A pound currently buys $1.28 and a pound currently buys €1.15.
I'll probably wait until that Wake Up to Money's on at 5:15 tomorrow morning, Louise, to try and find out that GfK figure, if you don't mind. I'll let you stay up till midnight tonight.
I never stay up to midnight anymore, I'm afraid.
And just this one you mentioned on the front of the FT, the subprime scarred banks.
Yes, really
retreat.
interesting.
Yeah.
Because the reason why it's interesting is because in the UK, new car sales are booming, and 80 to 90% of new cars are bought with debt. And in fact, 40% of second-hand cars bought through a dealership are bought through debt. So what happens in the States tends to happen here in the UK. So if there are worries about the US level of indebtedness to buy cars, then maybe we should worry about it here in the UK too. Yeah, the one boss in that article from the FT saying, we ran up auto for a while when there was not much else going on. Now we have growth in other areas that offer better risk-adjusted returns. So there you go. They're maybe not as keen on that as they were in the US. We're going to be talking a lot more about British Airways later in the programme as well. We've got a few more of your winners and losers from various parties' election policies coming up. We'll be discussing those. If you want to get in touch with us, text us on 85058, or if you want to tweet us, use the hashtag WakeUpToMoney. British Airways says all flights will operate as normal today for the first time since the weekend's IT failure. Manchester's Victoria Station has reopened following the bomb at the arena, which joins onto the station. That bomb last week, of course, killing 22 people. And thousands of small businesses in England who were promised financial help to ease the burden of hikes in business rates are still waiting for the money or their bills to be lowered. There's lots coming up to help you decide on who to vote for over the next 10 days of the election campaign. So stick with us for that. If you don't want to miss anything, you can subscribe to the podcast. Go to the 5Live website, bbc.co.uk/5Live. You can find the Wake Up to Money podcast there, or search on your podcast application on your phone for Wake Up to Money, and you'll get us, and you won't miss us ever again. Now, a few people, Louise, have been getting in touch with some dreadful stories over the weekend of the consequences of British Airways actions. One saying, completely lost a holiday in Rome thanks to BA. Flight was cancelled on Saturday. Couldn't get an alternative despite trying because all the other airlines were fully booked. Of course, yeah.
When I finally got through to BA, they wanted £841 to rebook me on a flight that they still couldn't guarantee was going to go out. When I asked a member of staff at Heathrow if I would have to pay, she said, "Well, you either want to get to Rome or not." That's good. I mean, it's probably not what you want to hear, is it? A lot of those staff are under a lot of pressure at the weekend. And this person says the key word in everything was rebooking, not rescheduling. Rebooking means they can charge you for whatever they've already paid for. The whole thing was a farce and devastating. And somebody else saying that a family member experienced this. They were saying you hear all the talk about the chaos with BA and saying all people are now on their holiday. Not mention the travellers who are flying to join a cruise ship as their holiday is over, as the ship has sailed.
Ouch.
They're now home and have no idea when they'll be reunited with their baggage. It's a tale from a lot of people. That issue with baggage still ongoing, although British Airways says it will resume all scheduled flights today. There have been headlines of British Airways being accused of profiting from trapped passengers, calls for an inquest. I mean, the story's not going away for the bosses. We did hear from the BA chief exec, Alex Cruz, who's issued an apology, blamed the meltdown on a power surge and a failure in its backup system. He said it's nothing to do with cutting costs or outsourcing technical staff.
There are no redundancies or no outsourcing taking place around this particular hardware live operational systems resilience set of infrastructure. In this particular case, it's all locally hired, etc., resources that have been attending to the maintenance and the running of this particular infrastructure.
There's been a bit of scepticism about the simplicity of the reason given so far. We can speak now to Lawrence Jones, who's Chief Executive of UK Fast, a hosting and IT solutions firm. Lawrence, good morning.
Good morning.
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 What do you make of what Alex Cruz, the BA chief exec, has said about the reasons for the IT outage?
Well, it's very easy just to dismiss it, isn't it, and say that it's not because of outsourcing jobs. But if they have outsourced IT jobs to another country, it's highly likely that they're short-staffed and it's a complicated environment. I would say it's unlikely that it's a UPS system. Just the UPS system. So
when you say UPS system,
uninterruptible power supply, by their very nature, they're designed to deal with power surges. So if it is a UPS system on its own, it
just bear with us,
Yeah,
Lawrence.
sure.
We've got a guest in the studio somewhere
With a phone going
with
off.
a phone going off, but it's all right. We're on top of it. It's fine. It's not Alex Cruz calling in. I don't think to contribute. You're saying basically if this UPS system.
Well, they're designed so that if there is a power surge, they should tolerate that. So if it hasn't, then it could be that the batteries have been left too long. You're supposed to replace them every 7 years. We're about to do ours over about a mile from here near the Trafford in the Trafford Centre. It's absolutely imperative that you test your equipment on a regular basis.
And this power surge, I mean, do they have the same electricity? I mean, do they buy electricity from the national grid like other businesses do? In which case, why is it just that BA's had this power surge? Why aren't there a whole load of businesses who said, we've had a power surge and everything's gone down?
Well, I'd agree with that as well. And also, really, you should design a system as important as this to be across multiple environments. You know, our data centers have different power supplies coming from different parts of the national grid. So there's no reason for a power surge to take something offline. There was an outage not so long ago from around here, and the BBC didn't go off. We didn't go off. So nowadays, critical environments should be fault tolerant. And then you've got to look within that. People load balance their equipment, so they have for every server you need, you have at least one spare. So if the server goes down, you're able to automatically move over. The issue they now have is if it has gone down because of a power problem, not necessarily UPS, but a power problem, that means it's highly likely that there's damage to the equipment, and you can even get data loss. So recovering an environment from a backup that's historic can be an absolute nightmare, which would explain why they're taking much, much longer.
They came out pretty quickly on Saturday saying it doesn't seem to be a cyber attack of any type. And they're the headlines we're used to seeing from a variety of companies, aren't there, over the past few years. Are you able to tell pretty quickly if it is a cyber attack or not?
Well, no, we're relying on their honesty for this. But what I would say is, and we own a cyber security company as well called Sakama. What I would say is on your DR plan nowadays, it's obvious, isn't it, to try and protect from externally. So trying to protect people externally getting into your environment. But what I would say is, your biggest risks now are internal. And if you've just gone and lost 500, 600, 700, jobs to another country, those people still working in the environment could very well be upset by this. It could be something as simple as a backup file being removed, one simple file being removed or not updated, and that would stop an entire backup not working.
Is there another problem that BA has been around for a very long time, and so there are issues with having legacy systems that maybe the low-cost carriers that have only been around 10, 20 years don't have? My mum used to write programming, actually, for BOAC.
Get her in.
Yeah, in the 50s. So I'm wondering if maybe it's her programming doesn't quite fit with the modern programming.
That is a challenge. I was working with the City Council a couple of weeks ago, making sure that we help them with the NHS problems and help them with the ransomware attacks. And one of their challenges was legacy equipment. And the bigger the estate, the more likelihood of having a server or a couple of servers or hundreds of servers being out of date. So yeah, you would imagine a company like BA is just in the way they've dealt with this customer service issue. It's out of date, isn't it? Everything they're doing now is out of date. So they look like they need not just to update their IT equipment, but also their behaviour.
And something like that can go right to the top, can't it? Lawrence, thanks very much for that. We're all going to be glued to what BA think is the exact reason why there was a power surge that sent this down, and we'll have you back on once we've got some clearer answers from them and see what you make of it. Lawrence Jones there, Chief Executive of UK Fast. Dan sent a text, Louise, saying, Willie Walsh, maybe we didn't hear anything from him because he might have been having a nice little weekend away
in Rome
somewhere. Well, hopefully not in
on
Rome.
his private jet.
That would be harsh on others who haven't got there. Roger says, surely British Airways insurers will require evidence of what went wrong. If it's a manual error, compensation will be difficult for them to achieve. So lots on that. And we'll be sticking with that in the next coming days, see what they say. But never mind that. General election. When is it? Flipping heck, Louise. It's next week.
It is. 10 days, isn't it?
Yeah,
9 days?
Not long. Blimey. We've been bringing people together from across the worlds of business and finance, from all walks of life, different political persuasions or none, to find out where they stand on the key issues emerging during the campaign. Today we're joined by Ian McWhirter, journalist and political commentator for The Herald, also author of Disunited Kingdom, Kimberly Scharf, economics professor at Warwick University, Heather Melville, chair of Chartered Management Institute Women. So do stay tuned for all of that. We've got them with us now on the programme, but plenty to discuss because over the weekend more has emerged about how the parties will manage social care and boost economic growth, while the two main party leaders, Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn, faced an audience and Jeremy Paxman grilling them live on TV. Theresa May defended the Conservatives' welfare policies.
In 10 years' time, there will be 2 million more people aged over 75. If we don't address the issue of our social care system now, then it is going to collapse. We need to do it and do it in a way that's fairer to younger generations. And that's what my plans are for.
Jeremy Corbyn spoke about Labour's finance plans.
The choice is quite clearly there. This manifesto, investing for the future, taxing more a bit for corporation tax and for the very wealthiest, 95% will pay no more, or continuing austerity, continuing cuts in all areas of public expenditure, and an ever-widening gap between the richest and the poorest in our society.
So those two got primetime spot on telly last night with those questions. Morning to Ian, Kimberly, Heather. Hello to you all.
Good morning.
Heather, we'll start with you, if that's all right.
That's good.
Let's talk about the personalities a little bit, because that's what we got a little bit more of last night. What have you made of, in general, the leaders' performances so far?
It's an interesting one, actually, because they're both fighting to get to the same place. They're just taking different journeys and getting there. And the whole thing around authenticity is what's coming through. For me, at the very beginning, I kind of was very much towards Theresa May, just because of a lot of things that she was saying that was important. But there's something from Jeremy Corbyn that's coming about his personality around authenticity at the moment. So I think it's going to be an interesting debate over the next couple of days.
Ian, what do you reckon?
Well, these things are always very subjective, but I was very struck watching on social media last night how many of Jeremy Corbyn's most virulent critics, I'm thinking here of people like Phil Collins from the Times, or Dan Hodges from the Daily Mail, Paul Waugh of the Times, who are very critical of Jeremy Corbyn, but all of them said this was his best performance, and indeed that he did come across as very coherent, good-natured and sincere. And equally, they were less than impressed by Theresa May, who seemed somewhat robotic, mechanical in her answers, and didn't seem to hold a great deal of conviction. But actually, for me personally, I think the real loser was Jeremy Paxman, because I didn't find his interviewing style was at all helpful.
Yeah, you're not the only one to say that.
That's a lot of that in the papers, actually.
Kimberly, just before we tuck into some of the topics brought up by listeners today, what have you made of all the leaders so far?
Well, I'm the thing that puzzles me the most in all of this is Theresa May's reluctance to engage in a public debate. And the passivity with which that reluctance has been received by the population and also by the media. I don't understand why people aren't a bit more outraged about that. And I would agree with the other comments. I mean, Corbyn came across coherent, sincere, good-natured, and May came across to me as a bit robotic, mechanical, defensive, and strong and stable doesn't really add up to stability when you, immediately do your turns under the smallest bit of pressure.
Well, stick with us, folks, because we've got to get through taxes, welfare, deficit.
Oh, sure.
So, yeah, easy peasy in about 10 minutes' time. And if anybody wants to get in touch, you can text us 85058 or get in touch on social media using the hashtag #WakeUpToMoney. Right, let's kick off then with business taxes. Ian, we'll start with you. We've heard actually quite varied approaches from the different parties. Labour want to, say, put up corporation tax to 26%. The Conservative Party say they actually want to continue lowering that. I mean, on the whole, where is it leaving us? Who would you go with here that has the right approach for business taxes?
Well, I think the Tories will say that there's no point in raising business taxes because you don't get more revenue. In fact, the revenue has increased as they've been cutting business taxes or cutting corporation tax since 2010. Though there are actually other factors at work here, and there was the bank levy that was introduced by George Osborne. There are a number of other measures he introduced about preventing companies exporting some of their profits, which may also account for the increase in the revenue from corporation tax, even as he was cutting it. And I think Corbyn's line here is quite a compelling one if you think of it from the point of view of the ordinary person's tax bill. Now they're paying more than 26%. If you're in the basic rate of tax, you're still paying national insurance on top of that, and that takes you over 26%. So 26% doesn't seem unfair to levy on businesses, particularly at a time when many of them are sitting on huge cash piles. And I think this is part of the issue here. It's really a question of fairness and it being clear that people are contributing their fair share of tax. Because after all, it was 26% back in 2010. 26% is still around about the average for OECD countries. So I think he's on quite a strong footing here.
Although, of course, corporation tax is just one of many taxes businesses pay. Corporation tax is like a profit tax, business rates, property tax sort of thing. VAT is a bit of a sales tax, national insurance and employment tax. I mean, there's a whole mixture of taxes. Heather from the Chartered Management Institute, what are businesses saying? What is your thought of whether the corporate sector is being taxed appropriately in all of them?
So I look along my high street and I think to myself, there are so many businesses that are disappearing, and they're disappearing because the taxes are just too much. They outweigh what they're putting into their businesses and they just can't continue. So we've got to do something to regenerate the economy and to get businesses moving, both from the corporate side for them to employ and expand their businesses, but also for the smaller businesses, which are the lifeblood of the UK economy.
Kimberly, I mean, when you look at the detail we've got from the parties here, there's lots of thresholds mentioned and various percentage tax rates. Is there one, do you think, that on the whole will end up cutting taxes for businesses compared to others who, on the whole, whether you're a small business or a large business, you'll see tax rates go up?
So all of this has to do with how businesses and small businesses, large businesses, corporations actually respond to these changes in the tax rates. So, in economics, we have something called a Laffer curve. And what it is, it's sort of a mound-shaped curve that we draw, which shows the relationship between tax rates and revenue that's collected. And as taxes go up, you can collect more revenue, but as taxes go up, corporations and individuals, for that matter, start to change the way that they make decisions. Try to avoid paying tax, maybe relocate to a different area which has lower tax, maybe shift from investing in one thing to investing in another thing. And as taxes go up and up, they reach some sort of a limit where after that revenue actually starts to fall. So, my question to everybody would be, what is the evidence that you have to think that 26% is the best rate versus 14% versus 12% versus 28%? I don't see any of these policies that are being proposed as coming with some sort of measure that says if we do this, then the response on the part of the corporations will be this, which means that we can generate this much additional revenue.
The corporation tax headline figure grabs a lot of attentions, but I know, Heather, for example, business rates, pretty unanimous criticism of the business rate system from small, large, pretty much every single corporate. What could the parties do? Because almost everyone agrees it's wrong, but no one quite agrees what to do about it.
So I guess the first thing is they haven't asked any of the businesses what can they do or what would be acceptable to them, right? They've just gone ahead and put something in place and said, right, you're going to have to pay that. There are different businesses that are subject to different taxes, and whether they're exporting or they're importing or whether they're just doing things in their local communities. And actually they're all being tasked with the same tax, right? And that is having a real tough effect on UK businesses right now. So I guess they need to have business conversations to decide what's best for them.
I think they need to have a conversation about the structural changes taking place in the economy and particularly in the high streets as retail migrates onto the internet, which is really what we're talking about, I think, when we're talking about the crisis of that particular sector. And this goes back to the problem of how governments re-engineer their taxation systems to start properly taxing corporations, large companies, the Amazons and the others, who are getting away with murder on the internet by using various subtle taxation scams to avoid paying their fair share. And I think this is the problem with just saying
well, they are legal, aren't they? They're not scams, they are legal.
I think this is where, where you really have to start talking about fairness here. We can't just have an argument which says, well, businesses, you can't have taxation because businesses won't pay it. It's like saying you can't have taxation, personal taxation, because people won't pay it. They'll find ways of avoiding it.
But it is fair, though,
that
Ian.
is capitulation.
Ian, on that, it isn't illegal, is it, what they're doing? It's a tax system put in place.
They're exploiting various forms of tax avoidance, which we all know about, which the government and a number of industrialised countries are trying to manage, not terribly successfully so far. As I said, one of the reasons why the rates of, or the revenue from corporation tax have recovered a bit, apart from the fact that there's been a recovery in the past few years, is because the government has been trying to come to international agreements to prevent companies just moving their profits around the world to low tax regimes. But if we capitulate to that, if we just allow a race to the bottom, if we say, we just let companies pay whatever they want, you've got to realise what that means for ordinary people, for ordinary taxpayers. Why should they be paying taxes if businesses aren't?
Kimberly, in terms of how we raise the money for whatever it is we want to pay for, one of the hot topics now has been social care. The Conservatives had it in their manifesto. Right. Would there be a cap on how much people had to pay for their social care or not? It now seems there will be. Is that a fair way to do it?
So there was a DILNUT commission that was established in 2010, 2011, and the whole problem with social care is that it's an insurance problem. As people get older, some people might need social care and some people might not, but nobody knows in advance of when they get there exactly how much that's going to cost them. And because there's this great uncertainty if the cost of social care when you're old, if you're unlucky and you get hit with that, it can actually be very high. There's no private insurance possibilities. So no private company would want to go in and do that kind of calculation where we offer insurance because it would just be too costly to provide. So the government's job really is to come in and protect individuals from extreme care costs. The DILNIT proposal, right at the moment, when this was done in 2010-11, there was a £23,500 limit, and people with assets above that received actually no state support. And they needed to fund their own care. So I don't think that took into account the value of their house. So there was no state intervention until people actually exhausted all of their savings and assets, and that led to even this huge uncertainty. So the DILNIT proposal, said to let's protect individuals from those risk of having extreme care costs and allow them a cap of 25 to 50K, and after that cap is reached, then government support kicks in. And what that does, it removes the risks of high care costs. And if you then introduce means testing for lower income individuals and put an asset threshold on that, then you also remove the risks associated with low income people who can't cover the minimum amount that's required. So as far as I know, no government's adopted any of these proposals. I think the cap is a good idea. I don't know what kind of cap Theresa May is actually talking about, because she was just very vague about it all. And I don't think that policy should be determined on the sofa whilst having an interview with a journalist, just because the questions become tough. I mean, I would expect there to be working papers, white papers, gathering of evidence to decide what the best kind of...
So I think this is really interesting. When everyone's up for election, they promise all sorts of things, and the people who end up suffering at the end of the day are the general public. And I sit here and I don't know if any of them have got it right, because I sit there and I'm starting to see people of different ages around me, either really suffering from poor health, some have got their own properties and some haven't. And I'm starting to think, what kind of care is going to be available for me when I get into my 80s or 90s?
If you need it.
Well,
exactly.
You should perhaps move to Scotland, because I'm amazed that people don't seem to be aware of this, but Scotland introduced the DILNIT proposals more than a decade ago, in 2001. They introduced a policy of free personal care, which doesn't discriminate between elderly people suffering from different kinds of diseases. They accepted the argument you can't say, well, for some diseases, you get paid, it's free in the National Health Service. If you have dementia, Alzheimer's, or what have you, you have to pay for it yourself. They thought that was morally unsustainable, and they introduced a policy of free personal care. It's been an all-party agreement. As I say, it's completely uncontroversial. No one opposes it here. It costs around about $400 million a year.
And it allows people to sleep at night, right?
Which sounds like quite a lot of money, but the point is that what they've discovered is that this keeps people much longer, older people much longer, sustainable in their own homes, and prevents them going into hospitals where they end up with this terrible term, bed blocking, and costing a great deal of money to the National Health Service.
And
so
the other thing, can I just interject here on
not
the housing?
Really, Kimberly. We've got like 12 seconds left,
my goodness,
and I don't even think you could manage to get that in there. Ian, Kimberly, Heather, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Louise, there's plenty more to chew over, isn't there? Thank you very much for your texts as well. That's it from Wake Up to Money today. More to come in the coming days.
On digital and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
bbc.co.uk/5live.